You're listening to Life Repurposed with Michelle Rayburn, where you'll find uplifting and practical advice for everyday living, creative inspiration for do-it-yourself projects, and recommendations for books and resources that will encourage you to embrace your life repurposed. I'm your host, Michelle Rayburn. Hey friends, thanks for hanging out with me here today. I'm really excited to tell you about something brand new that just came out. I've been talking about it all over the place. So if you're one of my friends on social media, I'm sorry for saturating your news feeds with the news about this, but I'm so excited about the book that is a spin-off of this podcast, and it's called Life Repurposed. No surprise there at all. Stories of grace, hope, and restored faith. I had this idea to create a book that was connected to the podcast because I tell so many stories on the interviews that we do on here that you've listened in on. And I also wanted to tell more than just my own story. So long time ago, I published The Repurposed and Upcycled Life and talked about what God's been doing in my life. And since that book came out, he's been repurposing even more things. And then this podcast came about. And then in 2020, I had this idea that I could tell other people's stories, and I set out to find some women who had stories of transformation, of things that had happened in their lives where God had come through in some way and turned it around or changed something in them and essentially showed them how they could have a repurposed life. Now, I got excited about it and then wasn't sure what I was going to do about it, but I put the call for submissions out, and I had way more than the number I could use in the book. So I've narrowed it down to 34 stories. They are women from around the world, and I want to tell you just a little bit about what you're going to be hearing in the upcoming interviews on this show. Because what's going to happen is starting in May, I'm going to have the authors from the book coming on the show and talking about their stories. And although it sounds as if we're going to be promoting the book, we are going to mention it, of course, but it isn't about that. It's about connecting with you, the listener, and showing you how if God showed up for somebody else, he can show up for you. It's about showing you what it means to live a life repurposed. And so it's going to be conversational, just like always, but my guests are going to be authors in the book Life Repurposed. And I'll still have those solo shows in between where I talk about everyday issues as well. Now, this book has 34 stories, like I said, and you will find comfort, inspiration, and wisdom in these accounts that come from women that are everyday women like you. They have come through trials and tough times, and these have included family struggles, infertility, health challenges, doubt, fear, human trafficking, depression, heartbreak, loss, and more. And they've come through and found forgiveness. They've started over. They have found renewed joy, fresh faith, love, healing, acceptance, and refined hope. And I hope that by hearing and reading their stories, you are going to be inspired to live your life repurposed. So this week, what I want to do is share with you the introduction of the book. This is what I wrote, the only part of the book that I really wrote. The foreword of the book is by my friend Jane Rubietta, and she's been on the show here before. And then the 34 stories are from some of the authors that I know, but some are people I only met through this project and for the very first time have heard their stories. There is a video segment that goes along with most of the interviews that you're hearing on the podcast, not all, but I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well, because you're going to want to go to YouTube if you want to see a little bit of that. Just clips from the interviews when I sat down and talked with each author. So without further ado, let me share with you the introduction of the book. When the idea of a repurposed life first sparked something in me, I was a blogger who decorated my home on the cheap with thrift sale finds. I'd post photos and tutorials to show others how they could turn junk into treasure too. Behind the laptop, I was a stay-at-home mom with 2 active boys who also loved the thrill of rummaging through other people's stuff on makeshift tables set up in back alleys and garages for citywide sales. They hunted for video games and books while I browsed the household cast-offs and rusty garden tools. As I transformed the 50-cent and $5 bargains into candle holders and luminaries, wall art and chalky finished accent pieces, I learned to appreciate the way discarded items gained new purpose through a little imagination and a few strokes of paint. It didn't take long to connect that passion with a life application, because everything's writing material if you ask me. Hardships and disappointments come our way. Pain caused by careless words or abusive intent cuts into our self-image, and tragedy, too harsh to speak of, pierces our courage and threatens to steal our confidence. But from the remains, we rise from heartbreak and press on, infused with the power of God who repurposes tragedy into victory. With a repurposed life, we release pride and selfishness, choosing compassion and humility instead. Emancipated from anger and resentment, we can rejoice over a renewed mind and resilient passion for helping others. Like my well-loved repurposed treasures, our imperfections and scars become stories that tell of triumph over trashy stuff of life. Where there was once shame, hope shines through. Where there was bitterness, love and forgiveness have taken over. Where there was emptiness, there is Jesus. When I wrote my first book, The Repurposed and Upcycled Life, I told my own trash to treasure story. How God showed up amid my stinky attitude and frustrating circumstances and gave me new perspective. And how he continues to work on shaping me into a woman who reflects the character of Jesus. I'm a work in progress. Now it's time to share the incredible stories of other women who have experienced the beautiful transformation of a repurposed life. In 2018, I launched the Life Repurposed podcast, where I often interview guests who tell of what God has done in their lives. I soon realized there were so many more stories to tell, more renovated lives to celebrate. And so the idea for Life Repurposed, Stories of Grace, Hope, and Restored Faith was born. We want our lives to point others to Jesus in such a way that the master designer and repurposer gets all the glory. Our before and after should cause others who hear our stories to say, only God could bring about something that amazing. We bring the junk, and he works the renovation with his power and his abundant grace. I've always been inspired by God's promise to Israel during tragic oppression. He will give a crown of beauty for ashes, a joyous blessing instead of mourning, festive praise instead of despair. From Isaiah 61:3. As you read each story, listen for the hope, the joyous blessing that replaces broken hearts. Lean in and look for yourself in the pages. This kind of repurposed life, one marked by freedom from the past, is for you too. I've celebrated as I read each author's testimony, praised God for his wonderful love and grace, cried tears of joy for every victory of which they tell. And now I pray earnestly for you, dear reader or listener here, that your heart will be stirred as you read. I hope you will pause to renew and restore at the end of each chapter, either on your own or with a group of friends. Let it change you and renew your mind. Bring on the repurposing. May the love and grace of Jesus be with you and give you peace. Anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone, a new life has begun. 2 Corinthians 5:17. You've probably figured out already that the resource I'm going to recommend for today is the book called Life Repurposed. One of the things that we did was add at the end of each chapter, Renew and Restore section. And this is some reflective questions or something you can do for discussion in a group. So it gives you the opportunity to pause at the end of a chapter and really think, like, where do I see myself in this person's story? What did God teach me as I read their account of what he did in their life? So you'll have that at the end. That's a tool that you can use. This book is available now on Amazon and other online retailers. We're going to be having a launch party on Facebook on April 12. It's going to run all day Central Time from 8 to 8. There are going to be videos with the authors, so you're going to be able to get some of the some clips of some interviews that I did with the authors in the book. There are going to be giveaways throughout the day, interaction opportunities for you. So I want to invite you to check out that group. I'm going to be sharing it in the Life Repurposed community that we already have. I'm going to be sharing it on my Facebook, on other social media profiles, and I also will have it in the show notes for this episode at michellerayburn.com/84. So you can find the link there. It's a public group. You can join, you can share the posts, and you can participate. And so I really want to encourage you to do that, because this is a community, and I love that other people's stories are helping other people find healing. And so that was the goal for this entire thing. I'm going to keep this episode short because this has been a crazy couple of weeks as this book has launched, and there's lots of tasks and communicating that go along with that. And so I'm just going to put it out there and say, this is what I'm excited about today. And I hope you are too. And so I encourage you to go ahead and get that book and read those stories, and still tune in to the podcast and listen in as I interview those authors throughout the coming months, because on those interviews, they tell way more of their story than they're able to tell in the book. So please do that. Thank you so much for joining me today. Like I said earlier, join the Life Repurposed community on Facebook if you haven't already. That one goes beyond the book launch. That's our ongoing community that stays around. So I'd love to have you there. So have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time. You've been listening to Life Repurposed with Michelle Rayburn. Check out tips, resources, and inspiration at michellerayburn.com. I'd love it if you would subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, or Spotify. I'd also love it if you would like, review, and share the information about this podcast with your friends. Thank you so much for listening.